Welcome to the Flower Prophecies, a podcast exploring all things flower essences and remedies and flower therapy, and how this vibrational plant medicine has the potential to heal and shift our individual and collective health and consciousness. We'll be diving deep into the specifics of individual essences, nature's energetics, emotional healing and growth, as well as hearing client case studies, hosting special guests and professionals, and I'll be sharing my own personal explorations and philosophies channeled straight from the flowers. Through my own unearthing, I have discovered what I believe to be the most profound teaching of the flowers, and I now wish to share with you the practice of alchemizing fear into beauty. Welcome back to the Flower Prophecies. This morning, or today, we have Liz Migliorelli, or Sister Spinster as she is known online. She is a clinical and community herbalist working with medicinal herbs, flower essences, personal ritual and nutritional recommendations. Her work is informed by old folk magic and the medicine of her ancestors. And for over 10 years, Liz has also been an educator in the realms of medicine making, folk magic traditions, storytelling, hearth-culture, ancestral remembrance, and mythopoetic herbalism. Welcome to the Flower Prophecies, Liz.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real treat.
I'm so excited. So let's dive in. You mention your practice and your work is medicine of your ancestors, and you have a lineage of apple romancers and herb folk. I would love to start there and ask if you can share a little bit about your roots, your upbringing, and how you landed where you are now.
Yes, absolutely. I was born and raised in Manhattan in New York City, and my people are certainly New Yorkers, but I also ancestrally my people are from the Southern Mediterranean. My people are Western Slavic from the Tatra Mountains. I have Anglo-Saxon ancestors. I have Western Gaul ancestors. And, you know, that line around apple romancers and herb folk really is to place emphasis on this relationship of belonging, and also just sort of how I try to contextualize where I'm speaking from. And I spend a lot of time researching and reading about the folk traditions and also the medicines of the lands where my people are from. And it gives me context in terms of how I can be in relationship with the land I am on now. I think that for a lot of people here on Turtle Island in the United States, they're especially, you know, like white people who have come over for a multitude of different reasons. There's a real disconnect from ancestry and from our roots, and therefore also from nature, right? There's this idea that we can just dominate and control in order to colonize. And so for me, it feels really important to emphasize who it is that I belong to and the relationships of tending, of care, of right relationship to land. And so that's why that's there. I mean, a lot of my people have also been beekeepers and people who, actually take care of apple trees, which is something that I also do. My family here in New York has been tending to apple trees for a long time. And this is the land that I was born on. I grew up along the Hudson River. It's the ancestral name for the river is the Mahicanatuck River. I grew up a little further south of here, and more recently, about 4 or 5 years ago, moved back to New York after being on the West Coast for a very, very long time. And I'm so happy to be home and and in the surrounded by the plants that I grew up with, and back in like the seasons as I know them. And I mean, really, it's the plants that I'm really excited about being around again. And yeah, that's how I'm here.
That's beautiful. I feel very similar in the sense that there's a lot of people around where I am from that are very disconnected to their roots, and I'm guilty of that as well. And I wanted to ask you, you speak of doing a lot of research around your ancestry and like their culture and practices and their connections to the earth. But I wanted to also ask that, and it sounds like it because of how at home you feel moving back to where you're from, but as well as sort of looking into it through research, do you feel you have received a lot of remembering from just working with nature and the plants yourself?
Oh, yes. That's like the main,
yeah.
main way. I'm just a huge nerd and read a lot too, but that's the main way is through the body, right? Through sitting with the plants, through being with the plants. There's nothing more powerful than that. There's absolutely nothing more powerful than that. Oh gosh, there's so much. I mean, I grow some of my ancestral plants here. I mean, like a really simple one is rosemary, but just through working with rosemary, I will often have dreams about my ancestors. I like remember recipes, like things come up through the body. And of course they do. Of course, especially with like the culinary herbs, right? These plants that our people have been feeding and nourishing and sustaining on for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Like, of course, those plants that when we eat them, we're also able to activate that relationship again. And I mean, for me, really working with plants is it feels like a really straightforward and, dare I say, easy way to come into that remembrance.
Yeah, I agree. And it's so true. That's a lot of how I find and witness people really come back to their roots is they start tending to the earth, having their own garden. That for me actually is exactly how I sort of landed back in it, is like you start, connecting more with the earth and you start remembering in that way. And then you go, oh, there's more to this here, So I love that. That's beautiful.
I think that there's sort of this experience that I know that is very common in Western culture of just this, like, that we're like the first person to have a certain experience, or especially if it's like a little bit different than maybe what our parents did or our grandparents did. But the truth is like, I'm not the first person in my lineage to love rosemary, and I think that it is a really profound experience when you're able to have that connection, because it's so powerful and so meaningful, and it really makes you come alive. And at the same time, that's information. Like, I'm like, that's information about your people. And for me, it's actually really reassuring to know, like, oh, my love for this plant isn't just my love. It's the love of my people, right? Like it actually has context, and there's maybe a reason why I love it. And I think like that has been such a lovely surprise as a part of this work, is realizing like, oh no, this isn't about like my individual experience. I actually get to sink into this collective ancestral knowing of like, oh, when I don't know why I keep talking about rosemary, but when I'm working with rosemary or smelling rosemary, cooking with rosemary, weeding my rosemary bush, I get to connect with all of the times when my people have also done that same thing. And that's so reassuring to me to not feel like, oh, I'm the only one who feels this way about the plants.
Yes.
It's actually like, no, that this has been how your people have been for a long time, but we just forgot.
I love that. And, you keep talking about rosemary, and what rosemary has sort of gifted me in the way of its sort of actions and properties is that it works with the soul family, and that it aligns us back with our soul family, and it brings them into our lives. So I'm not surprised that you keep talking about rosemary in this context.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not surprised either.
Beautiful. So you have been sharing your work and your offerings with flower essences for over a decade, or probably more now. I'm not quite sure. I would love to know how your about your experience with discovering this medicine, and how you kind of came across it and sort of were introduced to it and all the things.
You mean specifically flower essences?
Yeah, or flower essences in particular.
Yeah. The truth is that I don't remember the first essence that I took. I'm 34 now, and the first essence that I took, I think I was probably 18. And I think it might have been tiger lily, but I don't really know why. That just sort of like came to my mind. But I can remember the first essence that I took that like really felt significant for me. And I don't really even remember like how I heard about them, except that I was studying herbs, and it was one of the ways of making medicine that intrigued me, but I actually wasn't that focused on essences at first. It wasn't until I really moved to California in my early 20s when I actually really started to solidify my practice with it. But I did have an experience with yarrow probably when I was about 20 that where I was in this like, I was 20, I was in a codependent relationship with a person, and it got to the point where I really couldn't hear myself think at all. And we were just like so enmeshed with each other. And I started to take yarrow essence, but it wasn't even just the essence. I like snuck it under my pillow at night, and I would wear some in my bra, and just sort of like really was calling in that medicine. And after a few weeks, I realized that I could actually start to hear my voice again. Like I wasn't just sort of hearing what the needs were of this other person. I realized like, oh, Liz, you also have needs, and that, really led to like a big sort of reckoning in terms of the ways in which I was taking care of myself. And anyways, that was for me like a major understanding of like, whoa, taking a flower essence is actually immensely profound and can change so much of my physical experience. Because I think I was so focused on, as many of us are when we first get into herbs, it's like, because so many of us come to it because we were sick or have some sort of like physical symptom, we don't really realize like the spiritual, emotional, sort of like psychic capacities that can sort of be blasted open with the essences. So but I really got into the practice of making essences. And really, it feels like more than just making them. I sort of just say that I'm entering into a ritual space with the plants in when living in California. And that's when my practice around essences really started to deepen, and I started to work with them alongside, my like clinical herb work in a major way.
And so how much of your work comprises like using the flower essences alongside the herbs?
I mean, most of it. It's very rare that someone comes to me who is just like, I just want to work on my immune system. That's not necessarily something that I get a lot, but I mean, I'm not surprised. You've seen my website. Like, yes. I don't really have a lot of that like clinical energy up front. Yeah. But I can do it. Do it. And I'm really happy to do it. And I think I'm actually a really great sort of like, I'm sort of the doorway for a lot of people who maybe feel like flower essences are too weird, or like, I don't need to work on spiritual stuff, whatever it is, people who are doing that. I'm really good at converting people. Yeah.
I love that.
But yeah, most of my work now it includes essences in some way. Whether or not most of my clients are very, very open to working with essences, which is great. But then I also teach a lot of classes about flower essences. I have like a 5-week sort of beginning class on flower essences called Turning Toward the Flower. And now I offer a practitioner training program called Flowering Round. So I'm always talking about that. Yeah.
And your website is beautiful, by the way. I love it. I'm so drawn to it.
Thank you. I worked really hard on it with my friend Blue Firth. She's an incredible designer and highly recommend.
Beautiful. Yeah. So good. And actually something that I wanted to ask you about and touch on was, so you talk about how your work includes medicine making and folk magic traditions and storytelling and mythopoetic herbalism. And the thing that did stand out to me is the element of storytelling and how your lyrical descriptions paint these like intriguing and, beautiful pictures of what it is that you do and what it is that you offer. So I would love if you could touch on the element of enchantment in all that you do and why it feels so pertinent to bring this into your work. I know you touched on it a little bit in the context of when we were speaking about, the apple romances and giving it that, contextualizing it. But if you could delve into that a little bit more, I'd love to hear, because it really draws me in.
I'm glad. It's nice to hear that. Thank you for the reflection. Storytelling is really important to me. I think that flower essences are a form of storytelling. And for me, that has always been the thing that I actually feel most excited about with herb work. Even though I came to working with herbs because of physical duress and because of my own illness that I had for a lot of my life, the thing that excited me the most was always the mythology around different plants. And as a kid, I loved myth and I loved folk tales and I loved stories. And it's such an important part of life for me to really be in story and to relate to story. And for me, I think that reading these folk tales and reading these myths, and then also seeing that reflected in the herb world in terms of like thinking about folk practice, right? Like that to me was always the most interesting thing. I'm more interested in like how people have used this medicine over time, more so than like what chemical constituents are doing what. Like, I'm just like, that language for me, that way of telling the story is so much more interesting to me to speak about it in that way rather than in a chemical constituent way. There's different ways of telling the same story, but for me, I'm like, I want to be moved. And the constituents don't always do that for me. I'm happy to learn it, but it doesn't always work for me. And what I think like for me, it's really important to bring enchantment into the world, to really bring a relationship that feels, what am I trying to say? I think just that like something that feels alive, when we're working with the plants feels crucial to me in this work. For me, focusing on enchantment, focusing on this idea that we are actively responding to this web of life around us at all times. One way of thinking about that is like the immune system, right? But then we also have this other way of thinking about it, which can be magic, right? Like having our magic respond to the world around us at all times. And for me, I just really see a lot of value in that because so many people feel that the world is dead. I mean, we're like kind of taught that in school, right? That like nature does not have its own inherent wisdom, and that we're the only species that, you know, have this innate, incredible wisdom. And that's just absolutely not true. And so for me, bringing this element of enchantment back feels really crucial to our survival as a species, to really encourage the active kinship with the world in this way. And I think that that's really the focus of a lot of my classes and a lot of the ways in which I just sort of encourage my students. You know, the word enchantment speaks to song, right? Something that has been sung to. And what I'm trying to do in my work is enter into song in praise and devotion and in love with the plants around us. I want to encourage people to sing to the world. And I think that is something, that for me is just like my beacon. That's the thing that I follow all the time.
That's so beautiful. And I was just sort of thinking as you were sharing all of that, you know, you spoke of how you find yourself to be almost like this doorway and you're good at converting people. And I think, you know, that is to do with like this storytelling nature and like, you know, speaking through the myth and the tale and song, like you say, because it's, you know, whether people are conscious or not of it, what you're doing is really speaking to their soul. You're kind of like bypassing their mind and speaking to their soul. And so it's like can really stir within someone something that they may not have ever sort of looked into or sort of, you know, lived from. So, yeah, it's so beautiful. I love it so much.
Yeah. And I think it's like, it's really accessible too. I mean, I think, but it's the valuing of the experience, right? Like I feel like as kids, so many of us have these moments with plants or with, I don't know, nature spirits or a rock or the ocean, whatever, that sort of blasts us open into realizing that the world is so much more than what we are told that it is. And then, I mean, it could even be something as simple as like walking down the street and seeing a rose and just sort of being moved by it for a moment. And then just culturally, we're sort of conditioned to just like shrug that off and be like, all right, like moving right along, and I think that for me, I'm just like, okay, well, you felt there's something happening here. So then like, how do we go deeper into that? How do we, and it can just be so simple. And I think it happens to people on a daily basis. But for me, I'm like, okay, you've had the meeting, even if it's just really subtle and really small, and how can we then like deepen into the relationship? And that's, I think, really accessible, but we just don't really prioritize that kind of meeting culturally.
Totally. And it's so common actually that I will work with clients who, will end up sort of formulating a remedy for them, and there'll be a flower within the remedy that they're like, no way, like I always stop at that tree that has that flower, and like, and so it's
Absolutely.
like, yeah.
Yeah.
A quick note, if you are a creative, an entrepreneur, or someone with a deep passion or vision that you would like to expand into, if you know your potential and are desiring to transmute your fears into fuel for fulfilling it, if you want to learn more about yourself so that your relationships can feel expansive and easeful, and if this episode is stirring something within you, I want to share with you that I offer one-to-one mentoring packages where we will explore flower essences and using them to harness and harmonize your vision and creativity. Drawing upon all I have navigated and learned from working in the creative industries for a decade to creating deep relationships with the flowers, alchemizing my own fears, blind spots, and roadblocks, I have curated these 3-month packages to offer you deep healing, growth, and tangible resources to tap into your personal and creative evolution. Again, if this is stirring something within you that is calling to be tapped into, you can book a connection call or sign up for the Beauty Way packages via the link in the show notes, or by heading to hekahealing.com.au/thebeautyway. I look forward to sharing the flower medicine with you.
And I always ask my clients that, that's always something that I ask them. I'm like, are any plants like flirting with you, winking at you? Are you, like noticing anything in particular? Are you dreaming of anything, And sometimes people are like, no. And then, the formula is made and they're like, oh, wait, I do have a relationship with them.
Absolutely.
It's incredible.
Yeah. And I think it's like this sense of like you say, we've been told that like we're the only ones that have wisdom and knowledge and, that nothing else sort of is alive. But it's like just we've kind of given away that trust within ourselves that there is something to it. There is something there. And it's like we can listen to, even if we are the only ones that have wisdom, like air quotes, then trust yourself in knowing that what you connected with in that plant or that flower or that tree was real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the self-trust piece is a big one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I really feel like that's like a lot of the work that I do as a teacher is just really trying to encourage and like cheer on the trusting,
yes.
There's so much of that feels so important and so crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a really challenging part of it for a lot of people. But I feel like as soon as you do experience like almost like a confirmation of like that you're like, oh, I get it now, So you kind of touched on the element of magic and how it is a bit of how we are in relationship to the world around us, and how, when we deeply listen to the universe, it's inviting us to to moving into this relationship with the world, and what it is actually inviting us to do. So I personally find that the flower essences have played a big role in allowing me to witness the world in this way through the lens of magic, and sit in more awareness of the invitations that it presents. So do you feel like the flowers have been a big role in that relationship for you as well?
Yes.
Everything.
I would say that they are the star role, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I think that magic is something that I've always believed in ever since I was a kid, but it's through the plants that I think I first actually really experienced it, and just the way in which I can embody change, right? And embody responding to the world around me in such a way. For sure. I mean, I feel, the stories are just like endless, in terms of how they've affected me in this way. I feel like, being in relationship with the plants over the past, ever since I was a kid, really, for me, they have always been the thing that has affirmed that sense of the world for me. It's not like challenging my sense of it. It just is such an affirmation over and over and over again.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Are there any in particular, you've shared one already, but other stories that come to mind in terms of like this magic and synchronicity and yeah.
There's so many. I mean, I have so many examples. One is that when I was a kid, I would spend time in the summers up on the coast of Maine, far, far north, and would be around a lot of paper birch trees, like these white trees that have these sort of eyes on them. They're very beautiful, kind of spooky, but stunning. And when I was a kid, I sort of had my first experience of like understanding plant energy with a stand of birch trees that was by the house that we would go to. And in my body, I remember standing in front of this stand of trees. And it sounds kind of intense, but I actually had this understanding of like what death is from these trees, of just sort of having this like really visceral kind of, I don't know how to explain it, but it was just this feeling of like, oh, this is a tree that knows about death and then knows about rebirth. And that night, after sort of standing with these birch trees, from that moment, I started having this series of dreams as a kid about these three women, and they would like come to my bed and sort of hang over my bed. And they would be spinning. They were sort of like the fates, and they would tell me about magic in my dreams and tell me different folk tales and stories. And I stopped having those dreams, I don't know at what age, 8 or 9, maybe. They were really intense for me and like kind of scary. And maybe about 7 years ago, I made a birch essence from those same trees. And I started taking it again, and the dreams came back. Wow. Like the same dreams came back. And this time I'm not a kid anymore. And so like the relationship has shifted a little bit. But what I've noticed and what sort of feels relevant to the medicine of birch, I mean, birch is the first tree that emerged from the glacial ice. And so I always say like that birch sort of gives birth to the forest because it's the first tree to emerge, and then it kind of prepares the soil for, hard woods to come and grow, and it can establish a whole forest. And so it's one of these trees that in spring, it's one of the first trees to leaf out. And it's very, it just has this immense energy of quickening, of like emergence, and carries this spark of springtime in its medicine. And in that, it's also like completely initiatory, right? As many of those like springtime plants are, is just they really get things moving again. And for me, what I have found with birch is that it's like such a plant that really sort of like pushes you into the magic and sort of almost like whips you into it in the way that like it's used in saunas to like activate and circulate energy. It does the same thing. It's like, let me purge these thoughts and sort of traits that like aren't serving you, and let me like push you into like a new way of being or thinking. It's a very, very strong plant. And it was just such a funny, like, I mean, again, another affirming thing of like making the essence and then starting to get these dreams again and feeling like, oh, all of these feelings that I had as a kid about magic or about, possibility, like faded in my life. And then birch like brought them back again. And it was sort of just it's just such a powerful tree of rebirth in that way. I mean, yeah, I feel like I have 20 million stories like this, but that's who wanted to come today.
No, I love that. That's beautiful. Is birch a tree that you use with your clients a lot then?
I do. Yeah. I mean, it's specific. I mean, it's, it depends on the person, but it is, yes. I also have a program called Herbal Mystery School where we work with one plant intensely every month, and we do like tincture, tea, essence, and it's just like full on immersion. Beautiful. And we always start with birch because I'm like, that's the plant that begins everything, right? Like that's where we start. Yeah. But I do use it with my clients a lot, especially when they're feeling stuck, just like sort of stagnant, really great at like coming out of winter slumber feeling and just sort of wanting to like recirculate, remember, reinvigorate. But it also carries like a certain depth too. It's very different from like a daffodil feeling. Like, I think that there's a lot about its potential to sort of like reinvigorate like a spiritual awakening. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
My pleasure.
So amazing. I mean, I could like sit here for 3 days and just listen to all the stories.
I mean, how amazing that you get to do this for the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's so true. It's like, I have this one friend who we work quite closely with the flower essences, like, and just sharing like what's coming up, with them. And the amount of times we'll be like, you cannot make this stuff up. Like,
I mean, one of the things that we do in my Flowering Round program is that I give the group a mystery essence that we work with every 2 months. We basically switch, like they work with it for a month and then they have a month off, and then we start with a new mystery essence. And so they have no idea what they're taking. They have absolutely no idea. I know, which is really fun, but they have no idea. And we just on Friday, we just like proved, we just sort of like came together and shared our experience working with this mystery flower for the past month. And the level of synchronicity that was happening, like everyone was seeing yellow, everyone was having dreams of yellow, everyone reinvigorated like these practices that they had wanted to do. Lions came up for everyone, just like all, all of these things. And then the mystery essence was St. John's wort. And it was just like, it's just undeniable, and they had no idea what they were working with. And this happens every month. Like, it's just one of those things where I'm like, again, like not surprised, but in awe.
Yeah.
In awe.
Absolutely. So good. I love it. And so like, because you obviously have a lot of kind of different programs and courses that you offer, each obviously with their own kind of unique theme and focus. How personally do you work with the flower essences and choosing what you connecting with what it is that is coming up for you, or I'd love to know.
Yeah. I go through phases with them, as I think a lot of us do. Like, it's tough to like consistently be taking them. I need integration time. I think for me, it's a very intuitive process of like kind of just observing the synchronicities, honestly. Like I have some former students that have been working with Datura essence, and some of them have been telling me about it, and I dreamt about it 2 weeks ago. And then I saw one of them randomly to me, and she was wearing all white and like looked like a Datura flower, and then started talking to me about Datura. And it was one of those things where I was like, I've been thinking about it, and so maybe it's time. Yeah. That's certainly one way that I do it. But I also, that feels like the most intuitive way that it happens. But I also am actively working right now on like building relationships with different essences that I've made, that I am trying to figure out like how they move in me. And some of that is really just like it's not necessarily based off of this like divine timing or synchronicity. It's just more of like I really have been meaning to sit down with this essence and spend some time with it. So part of it is like necessity, and then part of it is fun magic. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. I resonate so much with that. I'm exactly the same.
Is that how you do it too?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, I just
like, oh, go ahead.
Sorry. You go.
Well, I was just going to say that like for clients too, it's like sometimes I feel like I sort of want to take something before I give it to someone to, as a practitioner, I feel like a lot of it comes down to necessity sometimes, which doesn't necessarily always mean that I'm like on my own fun journey with them, but it ends up being a fun journey anyway.
Exactly. And it's kind of like, as much as like you're just kind of moving through what you need to like work with and connect with at that time, say for work and, forming that relationship, it is in divine timing anyways, it's just not that it's not maybe something we're seeking or choosing out,
Totally. And I mean, and I know this will resonate with you, but like the number of times that a client has come in and then said the thing that they want an essence for is the same exact thing that I've been thinking about for myself.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. Or they just start talking, about what's going on for them and the realms that they want to work on. And you're like, well,
here we are.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Always the way. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you have had, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've had a line of your own flower essences for quite a while now. And you've got a new line of flower essences in the works, which I'm guessing is some of that which you are sort of connecting with and working on at the moment. So I would love if you could share a little bit about your process of, sourcing the specific flowers you're going to be working with and how it is you commune with them and what you feel called to bring into the world through the flowers medicine.
Yeah, I love this question. So the previous line of essences that I had were, I feel like, from a different version of me that was much younger and like newer to essence work. And there was specific formulas for different things. There was a formula called Saturn Return that was formulated to help people in their Saturn return, to help sort of release expectation, to help like with flexibility, to also help with like their boundary setting, things like that. Like that was all a part of Saturn return. And I would be kind of specific in my descriptions of the essences, being like, this plant is doing this in the formula. And the truth is that I don't really work that way with the essences, and I haven't in a long time. And it was just feeling more and more out of alignment for me to be offering, even though they work, like even though I stand by them and have had thousands of people tell me like how meaningful those formulas have been. For me, it just felt out of alignment because that's not how I'm telling the story anymore. Like my storytelling about essences has really changed. So, and I also have changed, I have moved back home. And so for me, a lot of the essences that were in the formulas that I was previously making were California plants. And now I'm back in like Eastern woodlands and I want to be in that place. And that's actually something that feels like a really important part of what it is that I'm trying to bring with this new line, but also always, with like with my work in general, is just that like flower essences are a way in which we listen to the great conversation of the land, and essence crafting is a form of place-based storytelling. And so like, the rosemary that I have here in my garden is going to make a different essence than the rosemary that is in your garden. Yes, rosemary has a similar signature, right? But that rosemary plant that I have is connected to like the soil here and the bedrock here and the certain angle of sun and the specific birds that sit near it and pluck all of the pollinators off of it. Like it's a part of like this song of the land. It's woven into the story of the land. And that's really what I'm paying attention to when I'm making essences, is how can I tell the story of this place? And that feels like a really important piece of like what it is that I'm trying to do with this new iteration of offerings. But it's like, we really can't separate the plant from the web of life that gives the plant its the spirit and vitality and form, and it's one of the things that I love the most. Like when I do mystery essence work with students, some of them can sense the difference between a rose essence that I've made in my garden versus a rose essence that I've made next to the ocean. And because they can feel the ocean in the essence. And that's such a specific thing for me. So what I'm doing, and when I'm making essences, I'm observing everything around me. And it's really not just focused on the flower, although the flower is certainly an expression of the land. it's also, I'm trying to figure out and I'm trying to pay attention to how the story of the land is also in this bowl in front of me. And that's really where a lot of my focus has been in like the past few years, and how my thinking has like really shifted. The context feels so important to me. And yeah, it's a really rich exploration.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. So beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And it's really so important. You can feel that in the essences when you work with them. You can feel what was going on. And this is another reason, I talked to a few other people on the podcast about that. Generally, I feel like flower essences can, and the practice of them can be stuck in this rigid way of like them, being made and the specific conditions and all the things, and it's like there's so much more to it, and it's the environment, but it's also like the conditions, like you say, like what was going on at that time. So I resonate with that so much.
Yeah, I have a lot of ways in which I disagree with the like commonplace sort of teaching around, or, just sort of the traditional teaching around what you can and cannot do when you make an essence. I'm all about touching the flowers. I'm all about getting in there. And it feels like, I mean, one of the things, like talk about like how the essences have shaped my idea and sense of magic in the world. Probably the most important gift that they have given me and understanding that they've provided for me is that we are not separate from nature. And consistently in essence making protocol, right? They say like, you cannot cast a shadow over the bowl, and you cannot pick it with your hands. You have to use stones or whatever, like whatever. And for me, I'm like, no, that's contributing to this wound that we're hearing over and over again, that we're separate, and we're absolutely not. And I think like there's a lot that you could get into there around like purity culture, right? This idea that we have to be really pure and perfect to be healers or medicine makers or whatever. But like, I really disagree with that in like with every fiber of my being. And I feel like if anything, the plants specifically have told me like, come in, like collaborate, right? Like that's the message that I keep getting anyways. And so I don't want to shut down. I don't want to like separate myself further. And like, that's the thing that we're like all trying to heal all the time is like that wound where we feel like we're separate from. And so why would I continue that in my medicine making practice? It's just fascinating to me.
Totally. 100%. And, it's as much about your medicine as it is the plant. So it's like, and the people that are meant to work with you are coming to you. So yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's why a lot of people who are really wanting to trust themselves come to me, because that's something that I'm really like pretty good at doing at this point. I'm like, that I don't doubt myself, because I certainly do, but like, I really feel that so strongly. And I feel like that's a really big part of the medicine when I'm making it, is just like sort of surrendering to the process of it and entering into a collaborative space. And I want other people to feel like they get to do that with the plants too. And yeah, I absolutely see that in the people who come to work with me, the people who come for classes. That's the kind of medicine that they're excited about.
So funny, you speak about how it's like emphasize, all those rigid rules, how they emphasize this, this notion of separateness to nature, and how, in my experience, how as soon as there's there's a feeling or a thought of separateness, it invokes fear in us, which is like, where everything stems from. And I was just thinking about how in the past, when I first was studying and working with the flowers, how I was following those directions, and how every time I would, maybe accidentally cast a shadow or touch the flower, instantly invoked a fear in me. And it's like, duh, like
who wants that in the medicine?
And it's just like when you reflect on it, like when I reflect back on it now, it's like, it's all that it does. It's like, as soon as we have that thought process that, we need to disconnect ourselves, the instantaneous sort of outcome is fear. And that's what's wrong with us all. That's what's sort of creating all of our issues, is this fear. So I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, we don't need to police ourselves anymore. Like we have enough of that. I think that it's, if anything, it's just over and over again. That's what I hear from the plants, is they really want us to be in collaborative relationship. And I think that's, how can we do that if we're continuously separating ourselves?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And so, obviously a large portion of what you do is in the educational realm of folk medicine, and sort of sharing these stories and this work with students. If there's one thing that you share with all of your students, no matter what you're working with them, in the nature of your work, what would it be, the one thing in common that you sort of share with everyone?
Like what I'm like telling them?
Yeah. Or like, whether it is a message from nature, or whether it is something, an experience that you think will, is important that they know, or anything that comes to mind.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the thing that I really just keep coming back to over and over again, and continues to like humble and bring awe, is to really continuously emphasize building relationship with the plants that are around you. And I mean, that's what the practice of folk magic is, right? Like it's this idea, it's one way of telling the story of how we're in relationship to the world around us. And I really think that there's like so much potential for feeling into kinship with where we are, right outside of the door. It really doesn't have to go beyond that. I certainly think about this a lot. I mean, it comes up a lot with just all of the like trending adaptogens and, whatever it is. Like there's certainly, plants that I have in my apothecary that are from places that are further away. But what's really rocked my world has been like the violets in my yard, like that for me has been the most profound medicine. And there's just something really simple about that, which again, I think a lot of people feel like it has to be this like flashy, shiny thing. But the truth is that the medicines that are around us have so much to say and have so much to teach us. And that is what I'm consistently coming back to. I also see that a lot with like, gems and like thinking about stone essences. For me, I'm like, I want to make essences of the stones that are in the river behind my house. Like, why are those less significant than the rose quartz or the lapis lazuli that's come from a mine in Afghanistan? Like the stone outside is incredible and provides so much, immense immense medicine for me. So it's one of those things where I think just sort of the appreciation of who is outside of our door and sort of who is winking at us locally is probably, I think, some of the most profound medicine that we can, or I guess that's maybe like what I am always encouraging people to explore.
Yeah, but I mean, it's, it's a common theme that comes up in most of my conversations. So it's like, it's not, it's not just yourself. It's this thing. And, I think it comes back to as well, wherever we are on our land, whether it is, a place we are sort of renting and only temporarily at, or, whether we have lived on a specific part of land for a long time, we're obviously there for a reason to get something from that land. So it doesn't matter sort of, the length of time you're there or the sort of environment that's around you. You're there for a reason. So you're connecting with that land for a reason. So, I think, again, it's like one of those things where we can like kind of talk ourselves out of like trusting our connection to it and trusting where we're at in the process of it, where it's just like, no, it's just like your surroundings and your land that you're on. And, whether that's a few kilometers or miles for you, or whether that's, literally in your backyard. Yeah.
I think that and sometimes I don't even know like what the reason is why I've befriended a plant, but I'm really happy that I have, or it's just like, I think just knowing that the potential for relationship is around us all of the time. And that like, even that in itself, if I'm able to, have a better understanding of a plant, like beautiful, great. And I think that there's a lot, just even like what a blessing it is to be in relationship with that which is around you. And I'm like, I do feel like, there's certain places, or sure, there can be reasons why we're in a place too, but I'm like, what if the reason is just to be in relationship and like that it can be so simple.
Yeah, we tend to overcomplicate things, don't we?
And then I know that people think that it's like boring or something or isn't profound enough, but I'm like, it feels pretty profound to me.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I feel like it's like even more magical when it's like in like the most mundane sort of, whatever it is. When you can find the magic in the mundane, it's much more powerful and inspiring.
Yeah. And then life isn't such a slog either. It's like, wow, we really get to shift our perspective about something that could feel really tiring or boring, but like, look at that. It's what a blessing, what a gift.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thank you. I did have one last question, though you already kind of touched on it. So let me know if you have anything else to share on this. If there was one thing that you believe the plant world and nature would like the collective to know right now, what would that be?
I mean, it feels hard to speak for the whole plant realm. They all have a lot of different ideas. I don't know. I mean, it just sort of feels like a continuation of what we were just saying, like really, really placing yourself in the ecology, of where you are and the medicine of that. I think that there's, just great potential there. Great potential.
Absolutely. And is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience today, if there's anything that comes to mind?
I don't know, just like a thank you. I just want to, say thank you to you and to everyone who listened and to all of the plants that we spoke about. I mean, I feel like that is one thing that I maybe didn't speak on as much, but which is such a huge part of my practice is gratitude, and really, really saying thanks a lot to the plants. And that just feels like a really good place to end is an offering of that.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. Always thank the plants.
Yeah.
Always thank the plants.
I know, really can't do enough of it, and like go and sing the plant songs, go and be an enchanter.
Absolutely. I know you're off Instagram at the moment, but I loved watching, all of the beautiful nourishment and everything that you're continuously giving to your apples, your apple trees. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're getting milk this week.
They have quite a diet, those trees. It's that's a whole new thing for me to be tending to this orchard that I'm tending to, and I'm learning a lot.
I bet.
And, learning what works and what doesn't work. And my partner is a herdsman at a dairy farm, so we have a lot of raw milk availability. And
beautiful.
And the calcium's really good for the trees.
Yeah, so. That's great. I love that. Question: have you worked with an apple essence?
Oh yes.
Yes. Share with me what the apple's all about.
I mean, I was gonna bring it up earlier, but then I was like, I don't know. I've been talking about, but literally, I find that apple helps us to enchant the mundane. Like if you think about just how miraculous they are, but then like we sort of take them for granted because they're in every grocery store. It's just this like magic that's totally hidden in plain sight. Apple is, under the domain of Venus. It has the five petals in the rose family. And there's just so much about like opening one's heart to enchantment in all realms. That's sort of how it's been portrayed. And I mean, that's like the story of apple in every folk tale, right? Like it's one of the plants that's written about the most in Western and Northern European folklore. That is the place where the Fae dwell and live. And I think that there's something about that tree that really helps us fall in love with the world. And so I actually use it a lot in my practice when people are just completely disenchanted, which happens all the time in our world, no surprise. But that they need like a softening, a trusting, and a like subtle but powerful opening, something that is both like familiar and immensely powerful. It's a plant that, I mean, it's certainly done that in my life. It's definitely done that for me. But I really reach for apple essence when someone is just sort of at their like complete wit's end, whether it be like through sort of like feeling the weight of capitalism, or just has had sort of like endless sort of upsets, or is just sort of exhausted by life. Apple is a plant that I reach for.
Oh, I love that so much. I planted an apple tree last year, so I'm like waiting for it to grow big. But it's so interesting, like listening to how it is, how you see it and what that brings forth for you, because I don't know what it is. I I just find it so incredibly fascinating that an apple can grow on a tree. And I don't know what it is, because everyone else seems to be like, yeah. And I'm like, but what do you mean this apple grows on this tree? Like, there's something about it that I just am like, so like mind blown about, that this apple can grow on a tree.
I mean, it is miraculous. Yeah. I mean, this is the first year that I've really been watching the process of them grow up close. And it is so wild that like, I'm like, oh, there was this moment when the entire orchard was in bloom, just like hundreds of blossoms. And then a week later, from the pistil of the flower, there's now like a fleshy fruit. You know, I'm like, I'm sorry, that is magic.
Yeah.
You know, like, talk about enchantment. I mean, there it is.
Yes, I so agree.
Yeah, it is. It's, I mean, all fruit. I feel like that's something that I had a student on Saturday who we were out in a garden and she made an essence of raspberry fruits. And she was just like, I'm really into fruit right now. I was like, yeah, they're pretty incredible and definitely worth celebrating and like being in awe of.
Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, so good. Definitely the magic in the, I mean, I wouldn't call fruit trees mundane, but in the normal.
I mean, but they are for so many people. I mean, so many people don't even like know that fruit grows on trees, you know, like it's a, and yeah, it's like, no, an apple comes from the grocery store. It's like, no, it doesn't actually.
Oh, so amazing. Oh, thank you for sharing that. I'm really glad you got to share that about the apples and the apple essence. Beautiful.
I mean, again, the synchronicity of the conversation could not be denied.
Exactly. Oh, this has been so nice to connect with you, Liz. Thank you so much. If anyone would like to find you and your offerings, where can they do that?
Yes, I'm off Instagram right now. So really my website is the only way. So it's Spinster.net.
Beautiful. Thank you. And you've got so many different courses and offerings there, and the website is beautiful, and your copy is I just love reading everything about it. And you also have like a beautiful newsletter as well that you share a lot on. Are you still doing that? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sign up for my newsletter. I have a lot of I write a lot about folk tales and folklore and how that weaves into plant magic. And I love the newsletter as a way of sharing information.
So beautiful. Well, thank you again. It's been so nice to have you here, and I'm sure we will connect again. And thank you everyone for tuning in. And we'll be back next week.
Thank you.